This podcast discusses real-life experiences that may include topics such as grief, trauma, medical or mental health challenges, and other emotionally sensitive content. Please take care of yourself while listening, and if at any point in the conversation you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to pause, step away, or skip this episode entirely. While some of our guests are licensed professionals, the Holiday Survival Podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. If you are struggling or need support, please reach out to a qualified healthcare provider or mental health professional. Now, let's begin. The holidays can be the most wonderful time of the year, or they can literally be the worst. That's why I'm bringing back the Holiday Survival Podcast, the show that gets real about a season that isn't always merry and bright. If the holidays bring up stress, grief, pressure, complicated family dynamics, or just big emotions, you are in the right place. My name is Erin Billings, and I am your host. In each episode, we'll have honest conversations, share practical tools, and offer hope for anyone navigating the messy, beautiful, and emotional reality of this time of the year. No forced cheer, no sugarcoating, just real stories, real support, and reminders that you are not alone. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Welcome back to the Holiday Survival Podcast. The holidays can hit hard. Old family patterns resurface, emotions can run high, and the constant juggling of responsibilities can leave us drained and on the edge of burnout. What we often dismiss as overwhelm is actually our nervous system signaling that it's carrying more than we realize. Today's guest is Rēzin, a somatic experiencing practitioner and founder of Trauma and Somatics. In our conversation today, we're going to explore how trauma lives in the body, how to recognize when your nervous system is in survival mode, and what it means to regulate and reconnect in real time, especially during challenging moments. Whether you're navigating complicated family dynamics or just feeling stretched thin this season, this is the episode for you because it offers real tools to help you come back home to yourself. Will, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you as a guest on one of my podcasts. Why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, so that our listeners can get to know you?
Thanks, Erin. It's so nice to be here as well. I enjoy our time together. As you said, I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm a trauma educator, a somatic educator, and for the past 2 decades, I've really been immersed in understanding humans. It started as an interest in culture, and I think I could say I basically have a PhD in cultural anthropology, but I don't have a formal education in cultural anthropology. But I've studied culture, religion, spirituality, psychology, human physiology, and a whole lot more. And these days, I work at the intersection of somatics and trauma. My greater mission is to end trauma for humanity, to help the world heal. And if I take the lens of first principles theory, I believe that trauma is the core root of our problems as a species. I can see a way that connects to most of the issues that we have on our planet these days. And so I've made it my mission to help to solve that problem in some way, shape, or form. And the philosopher or the mystic in me says it's to alleviate suffering, but the scientist in me says we're going to really help people to heal. And I do that by training practitioners and working one-on-one with, you could say, high-powered, but very successful individuals behind the scenes. It's wonderful to be here with you.
I love how you pair the intuitive with the science. That's something that I think is really valuable, and it's practical but personal. And I think that's really important that people have a mixture of both.
You know, I find that for the longest time in human history, we had core myths that we all agreed upon. Here in the United States, when the United States was founded, one of the core agreed upon myths was religion. And there are many different cultures on our planet that have core agreed upon religious doctrine. If you were to talk about life or the world, you'd be speaking about it using the analogy that the culture best understands. On the planet right now, I believe that the core myth or religion that we're all sharing in is science. Now, it's not the same sort of doctrine that, say, a religion might have, but there is a strong belief in science. And so that, for me, ends up being the bridge so that we can talk about things that are a bit more esoteric in a way that's grounded in physical form. And I think that a lot of mystics and a lot of philosophers tried to put words to something that we didn't have a way of measuring for a long time. But now with technology and with neuroscience and lots of other different understandings and studies of the human body, we're starting to see a parallel between these more esoteric concepts and physical body and form. And I think that's the bridge for a lot of us. But it's also a way we can talk about the things that doesn't end up getting defensiveness or pushing away because we're not using the cultural language that really resonates.
Yeah, I think that language is powerful. Our words do carry weight. My mom always told me from a very young age, there's life and death in the power of the tongue. And I do believe that there are things that we can speak into existence, whether it's positive or negative, that's up to you. Another thing that we hear a lot is the body keeps the score. And in terms of trauma, I think that's a lot of what you talk about and what you practice and what you teach, because we've all heard of trauma. In fact, I would say it's probably one of the more overused terms in our society. But somatics is something that's probably a little bit more new to the mainstream world. And so a lot of people may not know what it is or what it looks like. Can you explain what somatics are or what somatic experiencing looks like in practice so that people can have an understanding?
Absolutely. And I'd love to qualify that word trauma even before talking about somatics, just briefly. And I think Gabor Mate says it best. He reminds us that the word trauma comes from the word wound. And it used to be that we used that word to describe a wound to the physical body, so the tissues or some biological process. But we didn't include emotion in that or psychology in that. So then we have the term psychosomatic, right? Meaning the psyche affecting the body, right? And so for the longest time, the word somatic or soma just meant the physical tissues, right? And that's a misunderstanding of the term. And so the word trauma has evolved in its meaning. It's no longer just the wound to the physical form where I cut myself and we can see the wound. It's now anything that causes that same kind of impact to the organism. And so when we think about it that way, the word trauma and the word somatic actually work hand in hand because they're pointing towards something that's more universal. So the word soma in its origin means our living process. And to have a somatic practice, the somatic practice involves sensing oneself on the inside, right? And it biases that there's really important information, sensory information that any individual is experiencing that can only be felt by them. And in medicine, we often leave that out of the equation. And when we do, we miss out on all that really important information about what the individual senses on the inside, right? So what we feel internally. And so when we work with a person's living process, the thing that wounds it could be something that's too much for it. And we say too much, but it's not always psychologically too much. Psychologically, we might be quote unquote fine, but our body might be giving us messages that says danger, threat, danger, threat. There's a tiger in the room, but we don't have tigers here in North America. But our body's still responding as though it is. It's there. So involved with the somatic process means that we're involved with our living process. And the human being is a growing, self-organizing process. Alan Watts, philosopher, said something I love. It's brilliant. He says, the apple tree apples and the earth peoples. Well, we have a culture on our planet that views the individual or the human being as something that was created. I don't have any issue with religion, so I don't want it to sound like I'm pushing against that. What I mean to say is if we instead imagine the human as something that grows out of its environment, and it has a process of growth, and it has an innate organic intelligence in it, recognizing that means to recognize that there is an impulse towards balance, there's an impulse towards self-correction. And all of the somatic pioneers understood this. I say somatic pioneers, but they were pioneers in human transformation, in different therapies, body-oriented therapies. They understood that if we create the right conditions, the body will do the work for us. And so somatics is that living process, and somatic experiencing is Dr. Levine's approach to working with that process to resolve the imprints of trauma. When we say trauma imprints, what we mean is the things that show back up as reflexes. And again, I'm going to reference Dr. Gabor Mate because I think that he does such a good job of putting this into simple words. Trauma's the wound. It's not what happened to us, it's what happens inside of us in response to what happens. So it's not the head injury, it's the concussion. Not every head injury involves a concussion, but a concussion is the body disorganized as a result of the shock. So we have shocking events that can cause this, but we have neglect, or we have subtle, repetitive experiences, or we have social contexts that make it impossible for our body to feel safe. Right? So all of these things can create a very natural and intelligent organization inside of ourselves in response to it. I think about these as adaptations that are wonderful. I need to know that that smell is associated with danger, and that particular area of some environment is dangerous. And I need to know it at the brainstem level so that instinctively I stay away from it. Where that becomes an issue is in culture when the sensory input is saying danger, but there's no actual threat anymore. And that's neuroception, and the brain goes, danger, but it's actually, the danger is past. And so the body can no longer differentiate between these things. And when that happens, we find ourselves stuck in chronic states of stress. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about this. And this can show up especially around the holidays, where we're around people that stimulate us. It triggers something in us that says, oh no, the threat's back. Or there's a threat to my safety, my dignity, my sense of belonging here. And our body reacts as though there's a physical threat to our body. I'll pause there because I know we're going to get into more about these things.
Every time I talk to you, it's like mind blown. First of all, I didn't even know that somatics, the word came from psychosomatic. So that's new information to me. It's very interesting how the etymology works together. But as you were talking about the trauma responses that people have, I'm starting to realize that I have recently been in one. So I'll have to unpack that later. But it's just funny how whenever you say certain things, it triggers the like, oh yeah, a little bit. Right? Yeah, it's insight, and it's a little bit cringe on the inside because I'm like, ooh, okay, yeah, that confirms what I have personally been feeling.
I want to add a little something to what you're just saying there, Erin, because one of the things that can happen for us when we have an awareness that something's been going on inside of us, oh, wow, I've been living in a trauma response, or I've been living in a chronically unsafe state, or I've been stressed chronically. One of the things that can happen is that we can feel shame, because there is a cultural narrative that trauma means we're broken, that it means something's wrong with us, that it means something didn't go well. Now, that's not true at all. Trauma is the natural reaction to too muchness. It means that something's right in our body, right? It means that our body's organizing to keep us alive. And it also means that we survived something that was too much. And now we're living with a bit of the imprint of it. And when we know that to be true, it helps to soften all of the criticism that we might have about what we're experiencing. But also that creates a little sliver of an opening for us to learn to be with it without rejecting it or pushing it away or feeling awful that it's happening.
Yeah, that tracks with me personally. Even I think on a personal level, I was living in a trauma response the majority of my life. And until I had my spiritual awakening of sorts, that was when I really started healing all of that trauma. And that's when I started to be able to notice things in my body. I mean, if I'm being really honest, I didn't have emotions until I was 35 years old.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I've done so much trauma healing that I thought I hit the place of, I'm done.
Yes.
But that's not how it works, unfortunately. I think you're always healing something because new things pop up or new iterations of that trauma pops up. And I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. But I think just the awareness, the fact that I'm aware of it faster than I used to be, that's improvement.
Yeah. And awareness is, I believe, the key. We hear this from ancient teachings, right? Awareness is the answer. What we don't have is the clarification that says it's not always conscious awareness. It's the awareness between the brainstem and the body. Now, I say the brainstem and the body as if they're separate. They're not. But the brain being able to recognize sensory cues from the tissues, sometimes there's an absence of connection. Just like sometimes we can't feel our emotions, or we're not aware that they're there. We're cut off from them. And so awareness is literally the key to all of this. But it's not just conscious, it's non-conscious awareness. It's communication within the tissues in our body. The fascia plays a part in that, muscles, nervous system, all of these layers of ourself, all of the living process. When it can communicate with itself, it knows what to do. I say it, but us, the tissues in our body knows exactly how to help us to stay alive, to heal, to self-regulate, unless there's something that has grown in a way that is maladaptive.
Yeah, that's so true. I think there's this agenda to turn people against the word woke right now. And all wokeness is awareness. That's all it is just being aware. And if that's what you define as woke, then sign me up. But you just mentioned the holidays, they stir up so many emotions, whether it's stress or anxiety or even shutdown or exhaustion. All of these things I have experienced. I'm sure everybody out there listening has. How can someone tell the difference between their normal holiday stress and a trauma response?
Yeah, that's such a good and important question. First, we have to know what it feels like in our bodies to have that imprint triggered from something that was too much. Then we have to know what it feels like in our bodies to be stressed. Because to be able to differentiate those two, we have to be able to identify them. So there is a difference between the stress of a trauma memory, which has been triggered, which is usually accompanied by some sort of autonomic nervous system response, a flooding of stress hormones, right? That might include racing thoughts. It might include dissociation. But stress might also trigger a feeling that's very similar to that. It just all depends. So level one is us being able to sense and know and identify. What I can say is the difference for me is I can still be present and have a conversation with you. I'm not so flooded with emotion or limbic response, right? I'm not so flooded with intensity that I can't socially interact with you. I'm not having trouble sleeping. I'm not ruminating. I'm not imagining worst case scenarios. I'm not full of anxiety, and I'm not numb. If that's my baseline, then I'm not so overwhelmed that I'm crashing or I'm hypervigilant. For some of us, it might be our baseline that we're stressed most of the time. We might be living in that chronic state of dysregulation. If we are, and then we add another layer of stress on top of that extra layer of stress, it's the princess and the pea or the straw that broke the camel's back, to use those analogies. It's just the too muchness because our system is already right at the top of our threshold. So I will ask myself the question, can I stay present? Can I be socially engaged? And if the answer is no, then I know that stress is too much. But a trauma response is different than stress in that our body's reliving the moment or many moments of when something was overwhelming too much, and the body interpreted that we were in a life or death situation. Now, the way that the body tries to protect itself is through fighting, fleeing, freezing, or fawning. And there's a lot of nuance that's been brought to these 4Fs over the years. Just for the sake of time, I won't go into the nuance of that right now. But am I saying yes to things that I don't want to say yes to because of some invisible sense of obligation that I have to my family or to my friends? And if the answer is yes, then I'm probably overly stressed. But if I'm shut down or I'm incredibly activated with energy, there might be an imprint that's being triggered. Am I having memories of times similar? Am I preemptively imagining all the times when things didn't go well? If we grew up in an abusive household, going back to that family for a holiday comes with an inherent risk of violence. Our body remembers all the moments when too much happened. And so we're going to need extra energy. We're going to be extra vigilant. We're going to probably appease. We're going to be tracking the family. We're going to be trying to make sure that everybody's okay so that we don't have to re-experience those things. That would be a trauma response. But there is an intelligence in that. I need more energy if I'm going into a threatening environment. If I was going to war, I'd need more energy. And going back into a household where there was violence is similar to going to war. My body doesn't know the difference. The circumstances may objectively look different, but subjectively, they're not really all that different. There's a threat of violence. There's a threat to my dignity, right? Because at any moment, maybe I might be criticized. Then I have to deal with embarrassment. And so again, is the imprint from the past or is it from the present? That's how I differentiate. Is the current circumstance really objectively stressful, or is it subjectively stressful? Am I making sense with these descriptions? Is that all making sense?
Oh, no, I think that's great. I like it. I'm sitting here processing personally. I probably shouldn't be processing during an interview, but I'm sitting here as you're talking, I'm like, crap.
I actually think it's really good if what you're sharing right now humanizes this experience, because we're all humans.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're listening to this and you're hearing Erin share that she's processing, you're probably processing too. We're inserting ourselves in the stories that I'm telling, right? And I don't have to be as extreme as violence, but there could be just subtle threats of criticism, right? That we all know what it's like to be around that person that nitpicks.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you changed your hair. Why did you wear that outfit? Why are you 5 minutes late? Oh, and the subtle sarcasm, sometimes passive-aggressive statements that people make. Many of us have family members that treat us this way, and we get ready by holding ourselves tighter, by preparing our answers ahead of time, by not wanting to be there, by remaining quiet when they say these things. There's so many ways that we intelligently attempt to make it through. And so if you're personalizing, I think that's useful. We're analyzing, like, oh my gosh, this happens to me.
Oh, yeah. As you were mentioning, I think that from the holiday perspective of all of this, sometimes it's not even dealing with going into a family home. For me, I am thinking about walking into a church because a lot of my trauma is religious trauma. And I've had some recent situations lately, and I've talked about it in this series before. I work in church. I still help churches with their music. And to sometimes walk into situations where there might be someone who has harmed me down the hallway, or I might have to go up and shake their hand. And there's stories that we tell ourselves so that we can walk through that door and have a fake smile on our face.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good example, because that's going to happen in many different contexts,
right,
where it could potentially. And if we're consciously choosing to be there, then we do have to find a way. And sometimes the most intelligent way is to be disconnected from our bodies, right? Sometimes the most intelligent way is to do some breathing activities before we go in, to reset our mind so that we're not looping in the memory, to know how to interrupt the thoughts that will come up inevitably, to be able to then downshift the energy once we walk away, and again, redirect ourselves so that we're not stuck in a loop thinking about all of the bad things that happened, or being angry because that person's not paid for what they did. And all of those feelings that are going to come up are going to be completely valid, right? Of course, our body's reacting. Of course, we're angry, or of course, we're shut down. But sometimes there's no other way for us to get through that experience because it's too much. The too muchness is there. And so we want to be careful that we're not beating ourselves up about it too. I'm choosing to go in here, and I know that I'm going to need to use the strategies that my body best knows how to use in order for me to go through this. And then afterwards, I'm going to process it. And having somewhere to process it is really important. But the other thing I'll say, I may be jumping ahead, but I'll offer it here because I think it's relevant. What are the practices that we can use to help ourselves when we go into these situations? One of them would be a form of breathing, right, where we take a deep breath in and we take a sip at the top. And Andrew Huberman has done a great job of describing this particular breath. It's like the physiological sigh. Humming, different kinds of humming can be really helpful. So whether it's ah or boo or oh, these affect different parts, right? So the ah is a bit more up in the neck, oh is a bit more in the throat, or ooh rather, and then ah, the lower one can be down here in the diaphragm. These create vibration in our neck, which then stimulates the nerves in our neck, which can cause a form of relaxation. It doesn't always feel relaxing to do this, though. Sometimes when we do this, we have more energy because the contraction's no longer happening. And so the nervous system can give us more energy again because we're not frozen anymore. So if you practice this and you find that you have more energy afterwards, then we might want to do a different practice. So making sounds like that can be really useful. Slowing our breathing can be helpful too. This will not always work, right? If we're really anxious, this isn't the one for you. But if we're not anxious and we want to try to bring a little bit more settledness, one of the things that I like to do is follow my breath. I got this from a meditation teacher that I worked with for years. If we breathe through our nose, assuming you don't have a stuffed up nose, while you're breathing with the first couple breaths, just notice the sensation of the breath around your nostrils. You'll notice that when you breathe in and you pull the air in, it's cool as it touches your nostrils. On the way in, it's cool, but on the way out, it's a little warmer. So if we're noticing the temperature, we just take our breath in, notice the coolness, let our breath go out through the nose, notice the warmth. After a couple breaths like this, we have to elongate the breath slightly to notice the coolness on our nose and then on the back of our throat. So follow the sensation from our nostril to our throat. We can all do this together right now. If we breathe in, it's cool on the way in on the nostril, and then we have to take a little bit more breath to notice the sensation on the back of our throat. It's cool there. But then when we breathe out, it's warm in our throat, a little bit warmer and a little bit warmer on our nostril. And then the third step to this would be to follow it from our nostril to our throat and then see if we can sense the sensation of our breath in our chest. I find that I have to take a much deeper breath in order to sense it that far in. And I'll notice it nostril, throat, chest, and then chest, throat, nostril. We take a couple breaths like that. And what happens is it slows down our breathing and it elongates the breath. It's much easier on the way in to notice it than it is on the way out, and you can exhale much faster and still feel it. That slows down the autonomic nervous system a little bit. The third thing I'd say we can do is something called orienting. I don't think I did this in our last conversation, did I?
I don't think so.
So orienting is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to just take a look around. And so all of you that are listening right now, if you just take a look around the space that you're in and see if you can notice it as if you're noticing it for the first time. And this involves allowing your neck to turn and letting your eyes just wander and take in the shapes, objects, colors in your space, and don't have a judgment about them. Just notice them. You're going to be drawn to certain colors, certain shapes. And then when we do that, we'll pick out 5 things that we see. Right? Like I see the camera that's in front of me. I see a soundboard that I've been using to record myself. I see a picture of me as a child, my red amp, and my guitar. And then what are 4 things that we can touch? So textures. Like I can feel the roughness of this table, the smoothness of this pad, the softness of this object here, the coolness of my glass of water, and the smoothness. Then what are 3 things we hear? So there's the sound of my voice, but can we hear the sounds outside of the room where we are? I can hear the conditioned air moving in my house. And if I really listen, I can hear kids playing outside across the street, right? And then what's 1 thing I can smell, or 2 things I can smell? Smell is funny because we're mostly omitting most of what we smell. I can smell the gum that I was chewing earlier, and I can smell the soap that I cleaned my body with. And then what's 1 thing that we taste? I can taste the taste of my mouth. And I say all these things aloud because it hooks the neocortex to the sensory experience. When we go through this process, we're exploratory orienting. We're exploring our environment. If the environment is neutral or safe, what we'll notice happen is that some of you that are doing this might have yawned. You might take a deeper breath. I notice that when I'm looking at a computer screen a lot, I'll take a look around and I'll take a deeper breath. And it just happens automatically. Orienting ourselves to something other than the sensations inside or the threat experience that's happening helps our body to assess the environment, not our mind, but our body to assess the environment as neutral or safe. So we can do that before we go into a situation or a scenario where we know there'll be stress. And it gives the body a chance to assess the environment. It takes us out of all of our thinking, which the thoughts could be imagining all of the bad things that might have happened. And so it gets us out of those thoughts. And so after that, something else we can do would be to notice our weightedness. And a way we can do that is wherever you are, whether you're standing or sitting, notice the points of contact with your body and the surface beneath it. I can notice the points of contact where my arms are resting on my desk, where my sit bones are pressed against the chair, and where my feet are against the carpet. Then I can feel how there's gravity's tugging me. So I notice how there is a weight to my body that is in contact with the surface. And then I can also notice how my body presses against that and holds me up. So it's the interplay. We call this grounding, but you could call it something else if you wanted to. So I'm noticing that my body has weight and is in this physical location. And then the final thing that I will often offer people to do is self-contact. So maybe it's holding my arms. Maybe it's finding a place where I'd just like to feel a little bit of contact. Oh, that feels so nice. I notice if I put my hand behind my neck that actually my sacral area relaxes more. Everybody listening, you all can try this. Find a place in your body where you'd like contact from your hand. And I put my hand here on my chest. I can feel the warmth of my hand. And I notice that I take a little bit deeper breath. And you can hear that my voice is getting a little deeper. And so what that signifies is that the contraction that might have been happening before I did this in my diaphragm is softening. So there's more room for my voice. There's more resonance now. This works especially well for singers.
As you've been talking, I'm sitting here thinking, I didn't realize that vocal fry could actually make you feel better.
So true. Yeah, it can. And I noticed this is one of those markers for me. I can notice like, wow, if I have a bodywork session, if I have a craniosacral session, I'll notice the point when my nervous system shifts and my body relaxes because my voice just gets so much deeper, right? And there's room for resonance. We have places in our body that contracts when we don't feel safe, right? Our pelvis or our pelvic floor, our abdominal region, this area right below our rib cage where our diaphragm is will contract all the way around our body. Upper chest will contract, our larynx will contract, our jaw, this band around our head, and then near our cranial nerve will contract. That's the body attempting to hold on and protect itself. And when we feel safe, those muscles start to soften. Not always, but they will. These are different things we can do before we go into a scenario where there might be extra stress. But there are also things we can do afterwards. If we're feeling really charged when we come out of an experience like the one you described, okay, we got to go see somebody that maybe was an abuser, maybe they harmed us. When we come out of that experience, we may have a lot of energy in our body. We might be a little trembly because our body might be mounting that protection response, which is a lot of energy. So something we can do is help move that energy through humming or through singing. But we can also push against something. And if we imagine that there's like a door frame, I can push against that door frame. And I'm not going to try to push really hard and have a cathartic expression, but I'm going to push, which creates differentiation between me and the world. And then I'm going to press and engage my triceps. And then that engagement creates differentiation between me and the other. And there's a sensory motor pattern that forms early in life. We call it the push reflex. Is something that Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen in Body Mind Centering discovered. And Ruella Frank has done a lot of research on this. But that push reflex creates differentiation for the baby in the developing process. But we can use that when we're undifferentiated with the other. Because I can't tell that I'm separate from this situation in the memory. But by pushing, I can then become separate from it. And that gives the energy something to do. We can also do a few jumping jacks if we want, or some sort of shaking our body or tapping ourselves. Like these are things that we can use to move that energy out of our body.
Yeah, I've found for me personally, shaking definitely helps me to just move the energy out. And of course, you can't always do that as you're walking out of wherever it is that you're leaving. But whenever you get home to a safe space, I generally will just turn on one song that I can just shake to and just get it out. And sometimes there's a release, there's an emotional release after that, because when you're walking into a situation where you know that you are addressing your trauma headfirst, it is a completely different experience. And when you walk out of there, your body's going to feel it. You're probably going to be drained, at least in my experience. I've had to face my trauma multiple times in the past 5 years because I'm not going to just not show up, and I'm not going to stay hidden or hide myself in any way just to keep somebody else happy and safe. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to hold my head high. But sometimes to do that, you got to pump yourself up. So if you were going into, let's say, an unsafe environment during the holidays, how would you pump yourself up to walk into that room?
I'm going to do two different things. One, I'm going to provide my body with enough resource that I know I can have the energy to meet that situation, first of all. So I'm going to make sure I get enough rest. I'm going to make sure I've had enough water. I'm going to make sure that I've had enough food. And I'm going to make sure that I've moved my body. Those particular four things are going to make sure that my body has the capacity to handle the intensity that I'm going to walk into. And then second to that, I'm going to do something afterwards that's nourishing for me, that supports me to move that energy. So like you were describing, you dance or you shake, it's a wonderful tool. Right? So if I know I'm going into something that I know is going to be stressful, I don't want to do it when I've had not enough sleep, when I'm overly stressed, when I had a fight with my partner, when I'm trying to hit deadlines and I've been working 80-hour weeks or something like this, right? We know that logically speaking, I can make this argument that you're going to go into that scenario and you're not going to have enough energy. And so you're going to be reactive. You might say some things you don't mean to say. You might get more triggered. So what we want to do is make sure the body has enough resource. But I'm also going to make some agreements with myself that if I feel overwhelmed, I'm going to walk away. That I have permission from myself to do the thing that maybe I couldn't once do. So if I'm walking into a scenario where I'm with somebody that might have been an abuser or the perpetrator of something with me, or maybe a scenario that feels similar to that, right? That I have permission to walk away, that I can have a boundary, right? Because that's the do-over my body really needed or needs. So I may not have to endure it again. But also, if I can, maybe I will.
We're coming to the end of our time together. For someone who is just starting to connect with their body after years of trauma and disconnecting from their body, where would you advise that they begin?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I think it depends on where we're starting. Body awareness is something that can be wonderful, but can also be overwhelming if we've been disconnected for a long time. I'd say begin by practicing some of the practices that I even offered today, like sensing your nose, your nostrils when you're breathing, humming, moving, looking around. There are classes called Awareness Through Movement, Moshe Feldenkrais's work. You could go to some of those classes or seek them out. Reading can be helpful. Learning about body-oriented therapies could be really helpful. There's a lot of information on YouTube these days where you can watch videos with people guiding you. Forms of meditation can be useful and helpful. And then working with a practitioner, whether it be a somatic experiencing practitioner or a psychotherapist or a body worker. Rolfing can be really incredible. Cranial sacral can be really supportive because it's so gentle. I think for those of you listening, for you, it's going to be unique to you. For me, I needed gentleness, but there was a period of my life where I really needed intensity in order to feel. And then I got to a point with intensity where it just was not constructive and it was taking me away from feeling. It became the habit. And so I moved towards subtlety. And what I found at this point in my life is that actually the real skill for me is in learning to be with the subtle. The intensity is no longer necessary, but it's something I can practice consciously. Movement, exercise, breathing, yoga can be a form of this. But forms of body work can be really supportive for the parts of our body that are numb. What I found, I had a number of falls and injuries when I was young. These were not psychological things. They were physical things in my body. And I started working with a body worker, a Rolfer. Rolfing is a form of body work, massage. And she found the places on my body that were numb, and I couldn't really feel the pressure. And so she worked the tissue there, both the fascia and the muscles, and eventually feeling came back. And as feeling came back, the shape of my body changed, and I had connection to myself again. And sometimes there'd be little bits of emotion that would show up, but the freedom that comes on the other side of the numbness is that awareness that we talked about earlier, and finding a way in for you that allows you to get connected and to develop that awareness and pace yourself. Do it slowly over time. Don't try to do it all at once. There's not a weekend workshop or a transformational program that you can do that's going to quote unquote heal all your trauma overnight. That is a lie. It is a poor marketing tactic. It just isn't true. It's taken us a lifetime to become who we are, and it takes time for us to become something new. And so the analogy that I will use is that with exercise, we don't go to the gym expecting to change in 6 weeks. We go knowing that it's going to take us 6 months to a year to change the foundation of our body. Working with the psyche is even more complex, and working with trauma takes even more time. But the principle is exactly the same. Consistent effort under our max over and over and over again increases our capacity. And resilience is the capacity to tolerate stress. And that's built by consistently finding about 70% of our full capacity and doing that over and over again so that the body develops the ability to move between states, active, rest. And then it can make those transitions. So if we treat it like exercise, but we apply that philosophy to everything, bit by bit, and before you know it, you're somebody new.
I think that's really good information. It might be time to go into body work.
It has changed my life. It's been unbelievable. Yeah, doing psychotherapy and doing other forms of self-analysis are wonderful. What they leave out is the hands-on work of what the body's shape is. And we could do a whole episode talking about shape and how the body forms itself, because the thoughts that we have are usually just mirrors for what our tissue is telling us. And the habits that have formed over years of this is how I get my needs met, this is how I protect myself. And that also has a resonance in all of the ways that our body shapes itself and the tissues and the muscles and the breathing and all of it. So working hands-on is phenomenal, especially for those of us that have done a lot with the mind.
Yeah, I've been working with a licensed massage therapist because I've actually had 7 concussions. So when you brought that up earlier, I was like, you're speaking my language. So I've had a TBI, I've had a lot of head work done. And from that TBI, I learned so much about how the body works together. But I think then connecting that part with the trauma, I get geeked out about this kind of thing because it's fascinating. But we don't have enough time to go into my geeked outness because we're running on a time deadline. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. I always do every time I get a chance to talk to you. How can our listeners connect with you for more information about everything that you do and trauma and somatics?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's where I'm most active. I'm also on Facebook. We're in the process of creating a YouTube channel right now. So maybe as you find this, that might be available by then. But at Trauma and Somatics on all social channels, and at Rēzin, it's Rezin on all social channels. Those are easy ways to find me. And traumaandsomatics.com and willrēzin.com are my websites. I've been on a lot of different podcasts over the years, and there's plenty of time with me online. If you want to consume listening to my ideas, you can listen to the podcast that I've done with Erin and additional podcasts, and there are links to those both on my website and on the social media channels. And we offer training programs. The easiest way, if you're interested in experiencing somatic practice, would be to join our membership. We have a membership where all we do is practice somatics. It's both for practitioners and for people who are non-practitioners. It's only $33 a month. You get 4 hours a month with me, like deep dives. We're bringing in experts from the field, and we're going to be including weekly classes very soon in forms of movement practices and meditation and self-analysis and a variety of other things. So it's one of the easiest ways. It's on our website right now. It's called Embodying Somatics. And I think we'll kind of leave it there. There are training programs that we offer, and you can find out more online about those too.
I definitely need to look into that myself. So I will be checking it out. And for those of you listening, head to the show notes and we'll put all of his links there, and make sure to connect with him because everything that they do over there with Trauma and Somatics is top tier. So Will, thank you so much for being here. I always enjoy talking with you. And for those of you listening, I hope you come back for our next episode.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you for listening to the Holiday Survival Podcast. If this episode helped you feel a little bit more seen, supported, or sane during the holidays, it would mean so much if you'd leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tap the 5-star rating on Spotify. It's a simple way to help more people find the show, and it truly makes a difference. For resources, links, and next steps from today's episode, just check out our show notes and be sure to click the follow button on whatever platform you're listening to this on so that you never miss an episode from this season. Remember, you don't have to navigate the holidays alone. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode.